Hey everyone, Thomas here. Just want to give you a quick rundown before this week's episode. So we, a couple of weeks ago, sat down with our friend Carly on her podcast to discuss real estate. Carly has been on our show twice. She was on episodes 39 and 48, if you want to check those out. And we were also on episode 33 of her podcast, Hey Bitches. This time we changed things up, did things a little differently, a little more serious conversation. This episode was on her show. It's called The Millennials Guide to Buying Your First Home, featuring the Long and Hard podcast. As you may know, Josh and I are both realtors here in Edmonton, so we actually changed up the subject a little bit, changed the subject matter to what we're used to when we team up with Carly. But we sat down, went through the home buying process, discussed real estate a little more detail, a little more seriously. So if you're someone looking to buy a home, this is great advice for you. A little more serious topic, if you will, but was still a great one. And look, whether you're someone in Edmonton or wherever you find yourself in the world, this should definitely be useful advice to you. We know a lot of our audience is a little bit of a younger demo. You may be looking to buy your first home sometime soon. And yeah, check it out. Let us know if you have any questions. Please get in touch. We are doing a little more real estate content on our personal channels now. So links to all that jazz below. And then we should be back to the regular scheduled guests and stuff next week. Cheers.
You're listening to Hey Bitches Podcast, episode 75. Hey bitches, what is up you guys? It's your girl Carly. Happy frickin' Thursday. Hope you guys are having an incredible day. I'm very excited to sit down and do this episode, like I say in every single episode. But this episode, I'm actually really excited to sit down with my boys from Long and Hard. Now, if you've listened to the podcast about porn, you would know them. However, this is a very opposite, different podcast where we are sitting down and we were talking about housing, how to buy a house, renting, what is the best option, the credit scores we need, all of these different things that really was a selfish episode for me because I'm kind of in the market to buy a house. But this episode is really, really good. It is very informative, and I'm so happy that I had Josh and Thomas on the podcast today. So without further ado, let's get into it. You guys, I'm very excited to sit down and have the Long and Hard boys back on the podcast. This is a very contrasting episode from the last one that we did, because our last episode was about porn. Yeah. And now we're back and we're talking about buying a house.
Yeah, exactly.
Introduce yourselves, though, for all the new peeps.
I am Joshua, and I am one half of the Long and Hard podcast, and I am a real estate broker here in Edmonton. We own a shop called Revere. And to my left, or Carly's right,
is Thomas Harrington, also an associate broker at Revere, realtor, all that jazz, and yeah, here in Edmonton.
Incredible. Okay, tell the peeps really quickly, though, about your podcast.
For sure. We're technically a comedy entertainment podcast, and basically we interview vaguely interesting people from around Edmonton.
Vaguely?
Such as...
Ow!
Such as Carly.
The fuck?
And yeah, I mean, it's kind of Joe Rogan, but Edmonton people, because we have very serious conversations. We have pretty messing around conversations. We talk about, porn, sex, etc. when with certain guests. And then sometimes we have more like mindset coaches. We have comedians.
Yeah.
Yeah, all that jazz.
We run the gambit.
Yeah, we do.
I'm always surprised by the amount of Edmonton people you guys find for the show. All the
Me too.
time.
There's a ton, man.
There's a lot of people, and they're surprisingly pretty willing to...
Literally, it's every time you're this new guest with this new podcast who's also from Edmonton. And I'm like, Where are you guys? I know three of you. Literally, I know you guys, and then I know Two Girls One Broadcast.
Yeah.
Those are the only people who have podcasts that I know.
Well, every other comedian has podcasts too.
Exactly.
So,
and comedians are pretty willing to jump on, so that's an easy one.
Yeah, they love it.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Giving you some ideas.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Well, I mean... What are they going to come talk about? They're just going to do a 45-minute set about sex on my podcast.
Probably.
Yeah, probably.
They're all pretty capable. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Tea. But anyways, I'm really excited to have you guys on here because contrasting to our last podcast together, I am in that stage now finally in my life where I'm like, maybe I should move out.
Cool.
And so I want to have the discussion on, in your perspective, rent versus buying, how to buy a house as like a millennial. I also selfishly have you guys on the podcast because I want to buy a house. So it's just all of the questions that I have that probably other people have too.
Absolutely.
And I'm really excited. We actually had one of my friends, Janine, on the podcast came in and we talked about how to like save for a house and,
Oh, cool. Is she a like financial planner or something?
she is.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So we had her on here. We talked about like a whole bunch of different things, but in the end of it, it was, how to save for a house, how to make compound interest work for you and all this stuff. And now I kind of want to get into like the technical things about buying a house.
Sure.
And
Awesome.
Y'all are flexible with your knowledge. So I'm very excited.
Awesome.
So first things first, I want to get into it is rent versus buy.
Okay.
For me, up until 3 months ago, I never envisioned myself owning a house.
Never ever.
Never, ever.
Never, ever, ever?
Never, ever, ever.
Really?
Because I don't want kids.
Okay.
And I also want to be all over the place.
Okay.
So unless I'm making like billions and I can just own all the houses that I want to be in, then I was like, what's the point?
Sure.
However, now I kind of want a house.
How millennial of you.
Thank you so much. Except for I'm like right in the middle. I've talked about this before because I'm born in 96.
Right.
And it's like 96, 95 are the 2 years that everybody disputes on what is Gen Z, what is millennial.
Oh, really? Is that the cutoff?
Yes. So I'm right in the fucking middle.
Yeah.
And
Well-
I feel like I'm in the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair.
My brother's 95, and I think that's like
Yes.
the last millennial year. So I think
Yeah,
you are like the new gen.
Definitely, yeah. You can be the go-between between generations.
Literally.
I guess. Yeah.
Literally.
Translate. Explain TikTok to the more older millennials
Which
like
I
ourselves.
did to you guys.
And then actually do TikTok with the Gen Z. And yeah.
There you go.
Exactly. I'm definitely like, it's a very like, I think 95, 96, 97 is like the fluid year of.
That makes sense. I never thought of that before, but I agree.
You never thought of it because you have your place.
Oh,
Yeah, we're solid in the millennial.
Solidified as a millennial.
Yeah,
Solidity.
there you go. Solidity. I like that word.
You are solidified as millennials. I am in the middle. I am Gen millennial. Anyways, back to rent versus buy.
Yeah.
I want to know your guys' opinions.
Okay.
As obviously people who sell homes, but also just in my situation of us millennial Gen Zers.
Well, my take on it is that obviously they're two different things for two different demographics, right? That is kind of the flexibility of renting, is that you're able to, pick up and leave. Although obviously leases are generally, landlords do want their 12-month lease, but
Yeah.
I mean, it's obviously a lot more flexible than actually owning a piece of property and
Yes.
having to pay all the things that come with that too. That being said, when you buy, you kind of get exposure to an asset class. So you actually own a home and you own the gains and, downs that come with it too. So that's kind of the cool thing about owning a home. Obviously there's a lot more, setting your roots too. So a lot of people that we deal with, first time home buyers, going on to their second homes or whatever, they love Edmonton. They want to be here. They see themselves living here for the next, 10, 20 years, however long it is. And some of them are starting families. Some of them want that. I want to live in this place for the next decade or whatever it is. That's a complete, there's two different types of people. So for us, like me personally, I rent. Reason being is that, one, as a contractor, it's a little bit harder to get a mortgage.
Oh, I can't wait till we get into that.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll probably talk about that too. But for renting for me, just in the situation that I'm in currently in my life, I was renting with some roommates, and that was the first time I had moved out of my house. So was doing that, and now living with the girlfriend. So, having that flexibility, but also moving on with life and going that direction with it. That's my take, at least.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll be the first person to actually defend renting, right? For pretty much.
This is not the answer I thought I would get from either
no,
of you.
we're not going to be like, owning is dumb, pay your landlord's mortgage, but no, renting is actually good for exactly that reason of the flexibility, right? Like it's very low commitment. If you hit like a hard spot or whatever, like worst case scenario on most leases, your penalty is actually just like 1 month rent. So you can if you go totally broke, you can probably pay like $1,600 or $1,800 or whatever versus having to like get foreclosed on, right? Like it's pick your poison.
Yeah.
And then also for like, it depends on your life situation is kind of the biggest thing. So if you're kind of like a young working professional, maybe you don't know what city you want to work in, you're willing to like travel for work, etc., then yeah, renting makes a lot more sense, right? For me, because I rent too, and we'll come back to this, but as realtors and because we went straight into real estate out of university, it's a 100% commission-based job. It's actually very hard to get a mortgage early on with that type of job. With that, I mean, renting was kind of the only option. And now that I've done it more, essentially, once you start paying a whole bunch of money for rent, you're like, this is kind of dumb, especially for someone like myself, to what Josh said. Like, my goal and future is in Edmonton decently long-term, like just for the business we're in, et cetera, right? Like, it makes sense for me to be here.
Yeah.
When I look at, okay, what's my monthly rent on a yearly cost I'm just paying to my landlord, right? It's many thousands of dollars. And I think part of this, not to be like, oh, these millennials, but we've just become such a monthly payment generation that that's all we think about. And we don't think about yearly cost, right? So when you think about it, if you're like, for most downtown apartments in our city, if you have like one roommate, you're probably looking at about $1,000-ish a month for rent, right? Times two. Anyways.
Yeah.
So that's $12,000 a year. Like, that's a lot of equity you could be building, right? And that's what I've come to really think about and realize as I've rented for a longer period of time, right?
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, no, like I was saying before, I never originally, I guess, saw myself staying here forever because when we first met, I was literally supposed to move to LA 2 months ago.
Yeah.
And I was going to, and then the world absolutely fell to shit.
A little bit.
Yep.
And I couldn't do that. And so now I'm like, dang, the future is so uncertain. The presidential election is very uncertain. And I'm just like, I don't know if that is a place anymore that I want to move to.
Sure.
Yeah.
And now I'm just like, well, I've been bouncing back and forth with all the different cities too. I'm like, Calgary, Edmonton. Oh, wow, that's kind of it. I love Calgary and I love Edmonton.
Yeah.
I don't foresee myself doing a Toronto or a Vancouver because it's just like, I don't know, not really my vibe. I just work from home all day. I don't really want to pay $2,500 for a 1-bedroom Toronto apartment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely. Yeah.
So I've been on this like waffling situation. And then my mom, I was like, Mom, I think I kind of want to do this. And she was like, maybe you should buy because it's pretty decent to buy a house right now. And I'm a first-time home buyer. So she was like, that might be a good option for you. And I was like, Miss Ma'am, I have not even moved out of this house. And you just want me to buy a house and leave?
Yeah.
And she was like, well, it could be a good option. And I'm like, in my head, I know it's like pretty decent right now.
Yeah.
To buy a house because interest is so low because of fucking coronavirus.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like, you can get like 2% mortgages,
which is crazy.
Which is very crazy.
Which is
really,
crazy.
when you think about it, right? So, where my perspective has kind of changed is a lot of our clients are older than us, and like when you have like clients who are like, I've had numbers of clients who own like 100 properties, right? And then they're like, oh, I just need some cash, so I'll just liquidize this, and they free up like $200,000 or whatever, right? Like it's one of those things where like you need to start looking, if you're serious about home ownership and building wealth, like you have to look on that long-term horizon and start now. You're essentially buying a home is the bank of your house, right? So even though the value will fluctuate, if you live there for a long enough time or own it for a long enough time, you're eventually going to build a decent chunk of equity, which you can use in other investments or just hang on to until you retire or whatever, right? Like it's
absolutely. And that's something that I actually had a call with my manager last night about, because I was like, I mean, I have the clothing line and the brand deals and like all that, and that's like how I make money. But I was like, I want something more tangible. And
concrete. Yeah, exactly.
So I was like, okay, what could we be doing? And next year I turn 25. So I'm like, I want to start, investing, put in something over 40 years, and I could traditionally retire at 65. Like, you know what I mean? But I want to start investing and start doing all this kind of stuff because up until now I've done nothing. But also up until now, I did not make the money that I do now, which is a big game changer of it all, because the brand deals that I'm coming into, which is why I also wanted to have you on the podcast to like get your opinion on this, but the brand deals that I'm coming into are enough for a down payment on a house.
Sure.
So it's like,
nice.
What should I do at this point?
Yeah.
But But I completely agree on that. And so I actually took intellectual property law in university as my minor. But one of the classes is like real property, which is when we talk about like housing and like foreclosures and all that. And I used to also work for a real estate company, but I used to work for like a property management company.
Yeah.
So I don't know much about like actually the buying side. I really only know property management and rent. So I'm just like, what the fuck? So recently, my plan has been buy like a starter townhome here.
Okay.
And then I've actually kind of been looking at Austin, like Texas.
Oh, really? Interesting.
About renting like an apartment there because Austin is kind of like the new LA. Like everybody's moving out of LA into Austin.
Joe Rogan, yeah.
Yeah. Well, the thing is too, though, is like the creator taxes in LA is wild. If you live there for more than 7 years, you still have to pay like 50% of your like income or like income tax or whatever.
Texas
even if you
is
move.
0.
Texas has no rules.
Oh, yeah.
Texas
Texas
is 0.
is like Alberta.
Yeah, pretty
in
much.
the US.
Even more so.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And then, but the thing is, Austin is like Edmonton. Like I think of it how, you know, how our election, everything else was blue and Edmonton was
It's
orange.
like the one liberal kind of. Yeah.
Austin is Edmonton.
Yeah.
So I was like, it'd make a lot of sense. I would still be able to network and it would be way easier for me to fly within the US versus like trying to fly from Canada to somewhere for like $800.
Yeah.
A lot of the head offices like TikTok, Bumble, like all of them are in Austin. And these are brands that I'm
Have they
working
always
with.
been?
No.
Or just
a lot of
recent?
them are moving.
Interesting.
So I'm like, and our fucking favorite Twitter real estate agent, Ben Wagman, every single
I don't
day.
know who that is.
You guys don't know who Ben Wagman is?
No.
What?
Remember that conversation we had earlier about the older half of millennials?
He's like your guys' age.
Oh, okay. I don't know.
Okay.
What's his deal?
He's like a Dallas real estate agent.
Okay.
But
Okay.
he's like an influencer now because he just like at the beginning of I guess Corona, he just mastered it. He just started tweeting out like these beautiful like pictures of homes and was like, would you live here? Like, what's your favorite thing? And they just kept going viral and viral and viral. And now he like basically sells real estate to like all of the like NFL players there and like the NBA players and all this. And just from smart social media marketing about real estate.
And namely Twitter?
Namely Twitter, Instagram.
Okay.
Like
Really? Okay.
this man's just bought a Tesla from his freaking just commissions that he's just been making. I was like, it hasn't even been a year and this guy just went 0 to a absolute 100.
Okay.
So reeling it back in, Ben Wagman makes me want to move to Texas because he's always posting like these crazy things. But then I think about it and I look at it and I'm like, this house that you're posting, this like 7-bedroom, he posted this like 7-bedroom, 5-bathroom house in Texas for $500K.
Yeah.
I was like, what?
Yeah.
What?
Texas actually is very like
Texas is
That's
dirt.
in southern states. It's super cheap.
yeah.
Yes.
Won't be forever though if everybody's moving
especially
there.
if everyone's
That's the
moving.
thing. So I'm like, it would be great if I could just get on it earlier because I want to be like bi-coastal. Like I want to be back and forth through Canada and the US. And eventually I think my goal is I want to own one US property at least and one Canadian property so I can easily just pop back and forth. I don't have to worry about, you know, doing an Airbnb or like renting and leaving my apartment for 4 months at a time. And and then also, like you were saying, getting a mortgage is going to be absolute hell.
It's
they
much more
usually use
complicated.
2
It's
years.
2 years average of self-employed income.
See, but I was like employed by an employer
Yeah.
on my last year taxes because I was employed. This is my first year just like completely self-employed.
Yeah.
So can I use those too or no?
No, because if you're using any self-employed income, it has to be like 2 years for them to use it kind of thing. So even if
Rip.
you had even if you had like a normal corporate job last year and this year you were self-employed, like you can't straddle the line the way the qualification works.
He used to have a
used to be
mortgage license.
So full disclosure, by the way, you do have to like advice we can give on mortgage specifics is relatively limited.
Yeah.
You'd have to talk to a mortgage broker.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
But I mean, basically, unfortunately, with self-employed, it's
This is not
quite
medical
challenging.
advice.
This is no medical advice. No. It is 2 years is kind of the short answer that it's going to be. So mine is having like a cosigner or something.
Yeah.
Rip. Rip in the chat.
Yeah.
God damn it.
Just do a crazy year next year too. And you'll
just keep it up kind of thing.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
Okay, so then the short answer really is I cannot buy a house if I wanted to, basically. I mean, unless I got like a good cosigner and
Yeah,
whatever.
exactly. That's that would basically be the option. Or if you can put like a huge down payment and then
How much do you mean by huge?
Well, it depends on what
You're buying.
And then because like even if your income in the past was kind of limited or like you can only qualify for a bit, it's like, okay, like you could technically have like a $150,000 mortgage, but then so you have to make up the difference to like whatever purchase price.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So speaking also of down payments, I kind of wanted to also talk. I've heard so many different things. They're like, buy only when you can put down 10 or when you can put down 20.
Okay.
But then if you can't put down 20, only put down 5 because like like I've heard so many
Interesting.
different things.
Okay.
What is your guys' shtick on that?
It totally depends on what you're buying, right?
Okay, put yourself in my shoes as a first-time home buyer
Right.
who is probably not buying like a detached single-family home.
Yeah. What I'm thinking is that like obviously that determines your leverage on a property, right? So the less that you put down, the higher your leverage is on a property. So if you are 95% levered, then the gains and also losses in that property are magnified that much more than if they were 80% or whatever, right? So that's generally my take on it. I mean, I've dealt with people that do 5. I've dealt with people that do cash deals. They buy 100% outright. Like I've dealt with everything in between. I wouldn't do, well, again, this is not mortgage advice, but I wouldn't do the 0% or try to, finagle your way into that sort of thing. Because I think that's generally a bad idea.
Okay.
But for 5%, because of all the stuff that you have as a first-time home buyer, namely your RRSP pullout for first-time home buyers, that's usually what I see for at least first-timers, is maybe they have some sort of RRSP currently, and you can actually pull out tax-free for your first home.
So, okay, I wanted to talk about this too, because I quickly looked into it, but they're you can do, I think it's 5% for an old or 10% for a new build. You get some type of situation for first time home buying.
So to answer the first question, my opinion on it is if you're a first timer, you should either do 5 or 20, no in between, in my opinion. Because
that's kind of what I've heard.
Yeah. So and the reason being, so I don't know what the split is on your listener base for America, Canada, but for Canadians with the CMHC insurance. So when you have 5% down, you get CMHC insurance as rolled into the cost of your mortgage, which is quite high. But that's why 5% down deals are so cheap. Like the interest rates are so low is because the money's guaranteed to the bank without boring you to tears about it. Right. So, but then if you pay 20% down, you don't have to pay that insurance. So it actually saves you several $1,000s over the course of owning your home.
You only don't have to pay CMHC if it's 20%.
20%.
So anything under 20, you have to pay
CMHC. Right.
Yes.
It's like a floating scale, but that's why, in my opinion,
there's
doing
really no
10% or 15% or 12.275%.
There's no point.
There's no point because you're still paying an insurance. Granted, it's less.
But it just doesn't make up for it.
Worth it, in my opinion. So do the 5% to get into something. But that being said, the way it works is in Canada, when you put 5% down, the CMHC premium is 4% of the mortgage value, right?
Okay.
So if you put in a $400,000 home, 5% down is 20 grand. So your loan value is 380. 4% of 380K is 14,000 something. So the day you move into your home, you actually effectively only have about 1.5% equity. So if you're buying 5% down, be ready to own your home for 5 to 7 years or more, because if you try to sell under that time period, you have so little margin that when it comes to paying realtor commissions and stuff, you maybe break even, best case scenario.
Interesting.
So if you can do 20, I encourage people to do so and save towards that. But it's not a bad idea to start today with 5%, but you have to be decently committed to own that property, because also statistically, the average term of a mortgage in Canada is 33 months or something like that. So under 3 years, which means people buy and sell a home within 3 years on average.
That was going to be my next question, because
it's actually bonkers.
That's
which
wild.
Makes no financial sense to do at all, but it's what people do, right?
Yeah.
So
divorces, moving on
granted,
to another
that
one.
is skewed by Vancouver, Toronto numbers, where if you sell in that time period, your house is probably doubled. So, but
fair.
In Alberta, that number makes no sense to do.
For an investment property too, just off the cuff, you do need to put down 20% regardless. It has to be 20%.
Why?
According to our official answer,
you
could get away with doing 5% a few times.
Okay, wait. So why do you need 20%? Do you tell them you're buying it as an investment property, or how does that work?
Well, I mean, for your first one, generally not. But again, this is all not advice, but for investment properties, yeah, they want 20% down.
Interesting.
Yeah. And commercial deals is 25. So.
Oh, I mean, I probably will not be buying any commercial real estate soon.
Depends what commercial it is, but we'll get into that. So,
yeah.
Do you want to know my one fun fact I know about CMHC?
Hit us.
I know that if you buy a property over $1 million, you have to pay CMHC regardless, right? You have to put 20% down.
So CMHC only insures loans up to $1 million purchase price.
Oh,
so over $1 million, you should logically be putting more than 5% down, right?
You can't put less than 20, can you? On over $1 million.
Correct. Yeah.
Hell yeah. That's my one.
Yeah. Shooting for.
That's my 1 out of 1. That's what I learned in real property.
Looking at
Thank you.
$1 million homes.
Yes, actually, all the time.
We all do.
Literally all the time.
Yeah.
But okay, so going back to the fact that homeownership is on average 33 months is wild, because when I'm looking at when I'm just trolling, looking at houses for sale, and they have the mortgage calculators on the bottom, and it's 25 years, and I'm I'm not living in this fucking house for 25 years. Yeah. So what is the average length of home ownership that you guys have seen? Because
statistically
4 years.
Yeah, I would say anecdotally it's maybe more 6 kind of thing, which is depending
that
where
terrifies
you buy
me.
and what you bought. Yeah, I don't know. It depends on your life situation, right? A big reason people move is divorce or growing family, kind of the two opposite ends of the spectrum, right? We're kind of in a weird spot where, and this even ties back to the rent conversation, generationally speaking, especially more millennial and then whatever number is ahead of us, we're kind of in between the home ownership as a good means to create wealth versus a wanderlust free spirit, right?
So go find yourself.
I think that's how I feel.
Yeah. So I don't know, the magic number. I once upon a time saw a guy say, who's a real estate investor at a brokerage we used to work at, do all these crazy calculations. And he said it takes to make money on your home in Edmonton, on average, you have to own it for 8 to 9 years kind of thing.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And that appears to be vaguely true from what I've seen.
Yeah.
Taking
out 2007, 8.
Well, yeah.
Et cetera. And
even 2014 to now, it's obviously the opposite.
Yeah.
So.
Interesting. See, I'm glad we had this conversation, because I had no idea about literally any of this.
Yeah. So if you want to really succeed at real estate wealth, the problem is people want to buy their home and make $40K profit in 2 years. The only way you can do that is if you're flipping homes. You have to be actively improving the home, right? Hey, here we go, right? Versus just sitting in there, living in it doesn't increase the value.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
do value add to a property. And I mean,
value add, that's what I was looking for.
I have a friend that, he flips 3 or 4 houses a year, and you can do that.
Could never.
Yeah.
I wanted to literally move out of my house while I was painting this room.
Oh, God.
I was I will never paint a room again.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Me and house flipping will not get along.
It's different strokes for different folks, really.
Yeah, absolutely not. It will not be for me.
Yeah.
Going back to, I guess, me and what I kind of want to do, I definitely do want to own, I think, a house in Edmonton for sure. But I want to own other properties.
Yeah.
So, walk me through that. Do you have people who, your clientele are people who already own houses, who are buying their second house, or
Sometimes.
upgrading,
Really
kind of depends.
Yeah.
Do a lot of these people keep their house as an investment property and buy the new one? Or, because that's ideally what I think I would want to do.
Right.
I want to buy a starter townhouse, zhuzh it up, and then get something else.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, probably just speaking off the cuff, 20% of people do that. A lot of people sell that first house and move on to a next, they upsize or whatever it is. But I do see that with condos a lot of the time too, where people purchase a condo that they're going to live in to begin with. And then, they move on to a house and they keep that condo as an investment. I've seen that done too.
Yeah.
What do you think is smarter? Buying a condo or buying a starter townhouse?
This is a good question.
That's actually a very good question.
Yeah. So he did a full go check on his podcast, The Millennial Homeowner. I think he did a episode on that. But just off the cuff, condos, there's some other costs that come into the equation. And also with condos, you don't control the whole building, right?
Yeah.
So you own a piece of a building, but that whole building, you have to take into account repairs and maintenance and everything for that building too. So there's monthly fees that you pay into that condo board that help to upkeep that building, you have to look into that as well.
Interesting.
So you may be buying a condo for a lot cheaper than you would get a single family home, but you're also responsible for, an entire building. You're a part of that, as opposed to, your single family home where that's your whole thing, right? So simplistically.
Because you asked like more townhome versus condo, right?
Yeah. Like a row house, like they're detached. Well, they're not detached; they're all together.
Like an apartment style condo, right?
Yeah.
It really depends on what you kind of want / need, and it depends on the rentability of the unit, right?
Good point. Yeah.
So there's not really a super definitive answer. Yeah, it depends where it is. It depends. Renters generally want like accessibility, amenities, access to transit, right? So in Edmonton specifically, like more of a condo will have more options for that because a lot of our like central townhomes are quite expensive, right? So,
super expensive.
That's kind of a reason why. Granted, there are some good townhome locations around the city, so it kind of depends where you want to be. And not everyone wants to be downtown, but there's a lot of factors. I wish I had a better kind of soundbitey answer, but it does depend.
One thing I will add to the townhome conversation, too, is some of those townhomes are condominiums.
Really?
In fact, most of them are.
Okay, wait, go into that.
So when I say condo, you probably picture like a high-rise apartment building.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right? But condo, like the word condominium just means common property ownership. So in theory, a detached house could actually be part of a condominium because there's common property, right? Very, very uncommon in Edmonton, but
gated communities really generally.
Yeah, exactly. Where like all the lawns are common property and commonly cared for or whatever kind of things.
So like in like Sturgeon.
Sure.
Like in those there, like gated.
Yeah. So when it comes to townhomes, there is typically a lot of common property. For a lot of townhomes, the exterior of the building is actually common property. So if you need new windows, everyone needs new windows kind of thing, stuff like that.
Oh.
Or conversely, and this is something, a bit of a different topic, but because there are like residential attached, which is no condo fee townhomes, which you'll see ads for, right?
Okay.
So those obviously don't have condo fees, but that's kind of could be a negative in like 20 years when you need new siding. There's no reserve fund because in condos you have a reserve fund. I keep unboxing topics that are very complicated.
I'm just like, yeah.
So
this is why you get a real estate agent. But also,
okay. Well, I never said I would be doing this on my own.
But also, I mean, just think of a roof, right? Like in a townhome, you share a roof with 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different people.
That's so interesting. I literally never thought. Like, I mean, I looked at it, but it just like never clicked in my head.
So a lot of those, those townhome communities, like you're part of a condo, and you're paying some condo fees every month.
Interesting.
Yep.
Interesting.
And in some places, you're paying a HOA fee. So if you live in certain neighborhoods, there's fees that you pay to be able to use their services
like
or their rec centers or their parks or whatever.
Interesting.
Actually, you'll probably see this in any market, but if you're shopping in, it's pretty much exclusively newer communities where they'll advertise townhomes with no condo fees, right? Like they're all about that. And it'll be like a triplex or a fourplex, like 4 in a row, whatever, but no condo fees. So the downside of this, so the way condos work is like we were just talking about common property ownership. So in your monthly contribution, you have, depending on what it is, you have like common property maintenance, property management, some utilities, depending on the building. And then the big one is reserve fund contribution. So essentially all the units chip into a pool over the years. So in 20 years, 30 years, when you like need to repave the parking lot, you have money for that, right? So when you have no condo fee townhomes, the one downside is, it's nice right now, but in 15, 20, 25 years, when a big project comes up, it'll be kind of like a normal house where you're responsible yourself. No one's putting that money aside, right? Which in theory isn't too daunting, because if you buy a house, you need to save up for a new roof and stuff anyways. But it's just kind of something where, in my opinion, it's like, frankly, it's kind of builders being creative to try and sell these units. And it's not their problem. Once these units will be long sold and they'll be long gone from that area in 20 years. And then issues are going to pop up. And like when you're connected to people, there's kind of like like you have what's called a party wall agreement. But anyways, like, so if you have to redo your siding here and you can't agree with the neighbor and yada, yada, yada.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
it's something to think about if, again, we're talking kind of long term today. So.
Well, that's the issue too, is that you may have saved up and your neighbor may have been, going to
Sweet,
Vegas
no
or
condo
whatever.
fees, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the issue you'd run into in that scenario, right?
Would you then suggest that probably like a townhouse with a condo fee is maybe a better option?
I've never even thought about it, but maybe.
To me personally, it sounds like the better option. I would rather pay an XYZ amount monthly into a reserve than have to suddenly pay $8,000.
I guess it's your risk tolerance.
True. Very
That's
true.
the best answer I could give to you.
Yeah.
So yeah.
What would you pick?
That's an interesting one because, well, it depends on the age of the building too, because although, and I mean, I've seen new stuff have to have preventative measures put into place
like
or
2 years.
Yeah, like I was driving through the neighborhood in Calgary that just got wrecked by the hail.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It was crazy. I had a friend who lived in the building.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
damn.
that building is new.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, not even that, but deficiencies from builders
Deficiencies
too.
where the builders don't finish things properly and stuff.
Oh.
Yeah. It's actually
Is that common?
it's more common than you'd think. You'd think it would be like a 1% thing, but it's actually like it happens moderately often.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. So what would you pick? If you had to pick a townhouse, if you were buying a townhouse right now, would you
Yeah.
pick, all things considered, would you pick townhouse with condo fees or townhouse without condo fees?
Shit.
Both of y'all look nervous answering this question.
It's hard to answer. I'd probably just go condo fees with you do a bunch of due diligence on the condo corporation as part of your buyer's conditions, right?
Mm-hmm.
So assuming that looks good, I would probably go that route if I was buying a townhome personally.
That's actually a good thing too, because then you actually have the due diligence you can do.
That's a good point. Versus with like residential attached, you just like
Yeah, you buy it like you would buy a
or
house.
like
yeah.
eyeball their yards, kind of.
Yeah,
I guess. I don't
exactly.
know.
Okay, wait, go into that.
So-
What do you mean?
Okay.
So, and this is for anyone, like when you put in an offer on a home, you're going to have your conditions, right? So inspection, financing, and if the property is a condo, condominium document review, right? So you hire a professional company, they look through, you get like a stack of documents this big,
Yeah.
right? And they go through all of it. And
Or
it's
a
all
lawyer.
Yeah. And it's all the financial statements, all the monthly meeting minutes, et cetera. So you can see what's going on there. And if the corporation has like a bunch of lawsuits or they're super underfunded or whatever, or hopefully that it's well run. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Or future
Interesting.
projects
Yeah.
or one of 100 different
Yeah.
things.
So at least when you're buying something that is a condo, you can get that inside scoop, if you will, versus like something that's residential. It's called residential attached, but it's no condo fee townhomes, right? Those, unfortunately, you don't have as much of a history with that, but they're also smaller projects because most condos will be like, for townhomes, they'll be like 30, 40, 50 units or whatever, versus your residential attached, at least you only have like 2 or 3 neighbors attached to you, but even so.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of a dicey one. Essentially my point with it and the no condo fee one is it's something to think about. The marketing of those is done so you don't think about the long term. And me as a realtor, my job is to make sure you think about that, right? So
Yes.
Yeah. That's a good way of putting it, for sure. I wonder what your inspection would be for that too, because depending on how the units are laid out and everything, like you may have common heating and stuff and
yeah, not really. Most townhomes, your heating's within your walls.
no.
Yeah.
Yeah, it depends obviously on the building, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Very
This is a
case
case
by case.
Yeah, case by case for sure. Yeah.
Interesting.
It's very case by case. And then also for like what type of property to buy, it really is about your like lifestyle, your needs, your wants, right?
Definitely.
So circling back to rent, this whole need for me to figure out what the fuck I want to do with my life actually came about when I was at a nail appointment with my nail lady because she just bought a house. And I was like, I've been looking at apartments in Calgary. I toured a few apartments and I was like, I really like this one downtown apartment. It's 1 bed and den. It's in a great part of downtown Calgary, but it's like $1,800 a month.
Sure.
My nail lady was like, I literally pay $1,650 to rent my house. I was like, I didn't even think of that. People who are like my age, who like graduate from university and like they're not going and they're not, a lot of us, I guess, aren't like just immediately buying a house or like renting
Well, you
a
can't
house.
really, right?
Yeah,
So-
exactly.
Yeah.
Or renting a house. Like I don't know any like people who rent a house. Like I don't have friends who rent a house. It's always rent an apartment.
Yeah.
So in my head, I was like, I totally forgot you could just do that.
Yeah.
You could just rent a house.
Absolutely.
Instead of an apartment.
Yeah.
But I was like, this is the situation where that really like light bulbed for me. Cause I was like, why would I pay $1,800 to live in like a basically 1 bedroom?
One word, location.
Location. Absolutely.
Right.
But that location is not actually, I think, that important to me. And it's why I've been looking more at the idea of townhomes because I don't really need location. I can go anywhere. My job is flexible. I work from home.
Exactly.
So
Right.
it's more so the house
Yeah.
I'm starting to realize
Yeah.
versus wanting to live downtown.
Yep. And it's an interesting thing to look at too, based on like where the world is, right? And where downtown cores are, what's going to happen to them in the future. Those are questions.
I love the burbs.
Yeah.
I want to live like West End, like Secord, like townhousey area.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And I mean, that's you. And that's why real estate is so fun because I and Tom does like, we say, what do you want? And then we go and find you that because everybody's completely different. But again, the reason that you'd be paying $1,800 in the heart of Calgary is location, right? Like you have that restaurant that's probably in your first floor of
Literally,
the building.
it's literally right across the number 4 cocktail bar
Exactly.
in Canada. So I was
Exactly.
like,
Right. So that's the thing is it's all location.
yes.
And real estate is, don't let anybody else tell you this. It's all location, right? It's where is the place. And then from there, that's where you make decisions afterwards, really. At least in my opinion.
Yes.
yes. Incredible.
Yeah, it is all about location, right? So, and even for me personally, now that I've lived in the condo for a little over a year, right? Like I really love it. It's going to be hard to leave the like,
I like your condo.
centralness.
Yep.
Oh, it's a great building. It's on quiet streets.
I like
It's
that
nice.
it's not like super high rise.
Yeah,
Like you just have like
yeah.
those couple
Yep.
floors and you're
Yeah.
good,
Yep.
which I really like.
Like I like the idea of a high rise would be cool, but
Do you know how annoying it is when you have
It'd
to
be-
move out and you're on the
God.
28th floor? Like,
or like you're like carrying your mattress down Jasper Ave or some shit. Like
Absolutely
it's-
fucking
yeah,
not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is why we picked that spot, me and my roommate, right? So,
And that's why I went that direction too.
yeah.
Because it
And
was,
then yeah, but I'm looking at buying probably next year as well, and
are you going to keep your condo?
we don't own it. We're just renting.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
But would have been a good tie-in. It will be hard to get rid of the location, but the more I'm there, the more like space I need. Just being again like self-employed, having a better office space, maybe wanting a more permanent space for the studio that we can like customize and stuff, right? So, yeah, kind of similar things, right?
That's how
So-
I feel because I mean I've lived in this house for 14 years and this whole floor is mine. So like I have this room now, which is like the home office, which is going to be better than it is right now. It's kind of in shambles. And then I also have my bedroom, and then we also have a basement this level and a top level.
Yep.
So it's like growing up, this has been my entire space.
Yeah.
Like, and I love it because I can separate work from living because I have the home office space. And now the thought of me like just putting my desk against a wall in my living room is just, I just can't do it. I just can't.
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah.
why
Yeah,
I was
absolutely.
leaning more the house option.
And I
because
think-
I don't want to pay $2,700 for a 3-bedroom
Yeah.
fucking apartment.
yeah, I think a lot of people are going that direction too, though. Like this whole pandemic thing is the work from home revolution, right? So,
Yes.
so you want that office space, or you don't really care about the being in the heart of downtown because I mean you're working from home, right?
exactly.
So there's like real estate is consistently changing, and that's kind of something that we're dealing with right now too. Is I mean, if you look in, I'm not going to talk about commercial at length, but like office space right now, who wants to work in an office?
No
Some
one.
people, but generally not, right? So
I know I briefly looked at office spaces like for next year and it's not going to happen. There's
Yeah.
no point.
Yeah.
As much as I would love to have like an office and like have everybody come in, I'm just like, there's no point right now, I guess.
yeah,
My next question, I guess, is when it comes to renting a house, is it different than renting anything else? Or like, is there things because that's probably the route now that I know that I will not be buying a house next year,
Yeah.
is that I will go, is
Okay.
I will rent a house.
yeah,
The only
versus an
difference
apartment.
is utilities are extra, right? Because if you rent like a condo, apartments and like apartment style condos, right? Whether low rise or high rise, typically your heat and water is included in your condo fees.
Because they get like a whole thing for the building.
Yeah,
right?
and it's how the units are metered and stuff, right? So you just have to
Interesting.
pay power, right? But then, so that's kind of included in your rent, or a lot of it. But then when it comes to a house, you have to pay utilities totally separate. So it's a few extra $100 a month kind of thing.
Yep.
That's
Okay.
probably about it to know about. And then there's a little more like
There's more maintenance with the
more
house.
maintenance,
Yeah.
like mowing the lawn and
You got to
stuff.
replace the furnace filters and
Even if you're renting it.
yep.
Interesting.
Yeah. We replaced the water filter on our fridge a couple times when we were living there. There's a couple things that we had to do, but
Also depends what type of tenant you want to be, because you can be the like,
Piece of
hello, Mr.
shit,
Landlord, my light bulb burnt out. Can you
Yeah.
come fix it at
Yeah.
11:30 at night, right? Like so.
Oh my God.
you can be a piece of shit for sure, but we tried not to be, but
Absolutely. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about in terms of rent is renter's insurance.
sure. Okay.
Because I actually just had a friend who lives in Vancouver
Yep.
who opted out of her renter's insurance when she first like moved in, and then her house just flooded, her apartment just flooded. They had to get all new flooring.
Oh, no.
She didn't have to pay for it, like it wasn't her fault, but she was like, she did a story and she was like, I am kicking myself that I just didn't do my renter's insurance for some reason. Like she'd had it on her old apartment,
Yeah.
and she
Did
just hadn't done it on
have
her
to
new
pay
one.
for anything?
I
Like, as a-
I think so,
or like
but
her
like
own personal effects that got destroyed? Or
I'm
like,
not like 100% sure. I know she didn't have to pay for the whole thing out of pocket, but I'm sure she had to pay for some situation.
Yeah.
But it was crazy because like in her stories, she was like walking across like her kitchen and you could hear the water under the boards. I was like, oh, so they were in like a hotel and like all this
Yeah.
stuff. So I want to talk about renter's insurance because like I feel like every financial book that I read is like get renter's insurance.
Well,
so
most landlords will make you have it
Yeah,
too.
most landlords
oh,
require
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like most good landlords will be like,
They'll want you to
they'll
have
actually check that you have it too.
Who do you go to for renter's insurance?
There's many
Any
different companies.
insurance provider.
Yeah.
AMA,
Oh, okay.
is
Yeah.
who I use if I'm
Yeah.
not mistaken. Most
How much you pay a
banks.
month?
Isn't it
Mine
like
was just a yearly cost.
is it?
That's the thing. I've heard it's not. Yeah, I heard it's not expensive at all.
Like $300 for the year.
Right.
So it makes
It makes
pay
so much
that
sense.
versus like flooding your washing machine and having to
Yeah.
buy new
I
hardwood or something.
think I paid $25 a month.
Which is so low
Yeah.
Yeah.
for the shit that it protects you for.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's
It's definitely, it's definitely worth it.
And most landlords will require it.
Yeah.
Especially if they're a good landlord, or if you rent in like a purpose-built rental building, like, you know, I don't know, like the Mayfair or whatever block that's Raymond Block.
Raymond
on White
Block,
Ave.
yeah.
One
Oh,
of those
yeah,
ones where it's
yeah.
like professionally managed. Yeah, they'll require it anyways. Like you'll probably have to show them proof of tenant
Yeah.
insurance. So
Okay. And then just for the people who don't know tenant insurance, what does it cover?
Totally depends on your plan.
yeah,
But generally, you're like,
basically you as the tenant screwing up the property, and then also your personal like items too.
yeah. And then
If
you
the
can,
property screws up your personal items.
yeah. And then you can add and subtract from that too.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
Okay, so the next thing I want to dive into,
Mm-hmm.
now that we've kind of talked a bit, I guess, to death about rent versus buy versus condo versus detached versus
Yeah.
all of them,
Yep.
what I want to get into is actual money.
Sure.
Yeah.
You know, and we briefly touched on if you can't put down 20, put down 5, you da da da. But I feel like that's like advice that I have generically heard, but I need to know, you know, let's talk about credit scores. Let's talk about that kind of stuff. Like what goes into buying a house? Like I literally have no idea.
Okay.
So I don't exactly know the correct questions really to ask you guys right now,
Okay.
but
Yep.
go on a tangent and we'll see.
Sure.
For the finance and credit side of things, again, we can give moderately limited, full disclosure, not a doctor, right? But so for credit score in Canada, the minimum credit score required is 680, which is actually pretty, assuming you've like paid your bills moderately on time and stuff, it's actually not that hard. Like frankly, to be below that is like if you've been kind of, no offense to anyone, financially somewhat irresponsible, right?
me.
So yeah, 680 is the minimum. There used to be some places that did 650, but I think they got rid of that with the mortgage rules, right? So, and then when it comes down to affordability calculations, so when you go to a mortgage broker and you're like, how much house can I afford? What they're actually doing is it's monthly income to monthly liabilities, right? So it's all about, okay, so what would your hypothetical monthly mortgage payment be plus condo fees, et cetera, right? Then any other liabilities you have, like credit cards, line of credit, auto loan,
Yeah.
whatever else under the sun.
Don't go get a car loan before you get a house.
Yeah, exactly.
Get a house before a car loan.
Why?
Well,
Mess up your credit.
the mortgage is a lot well, it's not that you mess it up, but the
Or
mortgage,
throw off your calculations.
your mortgage is much harder to obtain than an auto loan.
Yeah.
Auto loans are very easy
They'll
to
give them
obtain.
to anyone,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
buy a house. Then literally the day after you move in, go finance a.
So you're telling me I
freaking
should not buy
Beamer.
a Tesla next year?
I would
Probably
unless you're
not.
buying it outright.
Yeah.
Or like have a very reasonable car payment, right?
Yeah.
So like, because
Yeah.
if your car payment's $500 a month, that throws off your affordability calculations by actually a lot.
Did they take it by like your month, or did they just take what you make in a year and annualize
So for
it?
you,
Like,
it would be
because that's terrifying to me. Because I'm like, one month I made
this.
this, one month
It's
like
the same
many
with
months.
us for
Yeah.
contractors. Yeah.
Many months of zero and many months of
really good.
a lot, right? So, no. So when you're a contractor, it'll be a 2-year average and then that divided by 12.
Oh,
Sort of.
okay.
So,
Because I was like, they're really just going to be like, this month you made no money, and I'm going to be like,
yeah. Can you look at next month or the month?
like,
No, we're the same way.
Yeah. It's really about your monthly liability costs, and then they kind of prorate your income or whatever to
what it is.
that.
Yeah.
And it's relative. I don't even remember how GDS and TDS works. So,
Yeah. It's a percentage, obviously, of your
Yeah.
earned income per month.
Essentially, what you should be aiming for roughly is about a third, right? So
Yeah.
I think the actual number is 38 or 39%, but all your living costs should be about a third of your monthly income, right? And then you have a little more margin for your total debt. For example, if you have like a line of credit or an auto loan, et cetera, it's
Yeah.
like 42% of your monthly income, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Interesting.
We're talking numbers.
I'm reading a book right now
Mm-hmm.
called Broke Millennial, and the chapter I literally read today was about this, about like how much like
Okay,
debt to
yeah.
income ratio you should have, which is very interesting.
So if you're someone looking to rent and like, let's say you're a younger person, you're like, can I afford to move out? Can I afford to rent? Like kind of taking your first step of adulthood, let's call it.
literally me. So use me as the example.
What I would say is like a healthy number to aim for is 1/3. So if your rent is $1,000 a month, you should be making $3,000 a month, right? Like
Interesting.
and that's even like a kind of conservatively generous goal to aim for because your actual numbers on a mortgage application are a little bit higher than that. But if you can aim for a third, that's a good like financially healthy number to be shooting for.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, I like that because a very popular thing that I've read like over and over again is basically like the percent budget. So it's like your housing should be 30% of your income, which is
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So
it's about
type
what we're
of-
saying.
yeah.
Yeah.
so it's pretty accurate to like everything that I've heard. But then they obviously like there's the skew for people who live in like New York or like LA who's
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
you know, whose rent is 70% of their monthly income or something, which is crazy.
Well, and that world is kind of changing, which has been
Yeah,
a bit
most
of a
definitely.
recurring theme, right? So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Something that also just popped in my head is the idea of rent to buy. Do you guys
Like
know
rent
any?
to own.
Oh, rent to own.
Like
Yep,
is
that
what you
one.
mean?
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Talk about that. I don't know a good question to
So-
ask, but
Yeah, that's a good question because I mean it's not super common in our space.
Yeah.
Generally, we see cut and dried deals. There's
so can you like actually just explain like rent?
Sure.
Rent. Like how does it work? Like does a percentage of your rent go to like I just don't understand.
Yeah. So generally, yeah, that's how they work is essentially you have a house, you pay rent on it that's above market rate, and a percentage of that rent goes into your down payment on the house, however many years or months into the future, depending on your agreement on the house. We don't see it very much. There are agents that deal specifically in it. We don't, just because there's a lot of like it's hairy. It's a world that's kind of like
It's not regulated and it's also not standardized or anything like that.
Yeah.
So you're essentially kind of like, you can obviously come up with a contract that says anything,
Yeah.
right? So, but it just can get a little dicey and there's kind of some weird greasy stuff just because you're kind of in the weeds when you're dealing with that side of the business. So it's plausible. There's not a lot of people who do it, but so unfortunately we don't have a great answer, but basically it's a portion goes towards your down payment. Then after like 3 years or whatever, you buy the house at X price and they credit this much.
and that's all in the contract.
Yeah.
You sign a contract 3 years prior saying what you're going to purchase the house for and all of that. So
Wow.
yeah,
Yeah.
they're interesting, but at the same time, I've never dealt with it. I've seen it done. There are agents that deal with them. Personally, again, I haven't dealt with it. I know Thomas hasn't dealt with it. So
Interesting. Next thing I want to talk about, probably last thing I'm going to want to talk about, unless
Sure.
y'all go on a tangent.
Oh, wait.
Here we go. Good timing.
Here we go.
Some builders now in new communities in Edmonton, you'll see like they'll do like a rent to own option. And that would be okay. Basically, if you're going to do it, if you see an opportunity to do it, make sure the contract's airtight. Get lawyers. Don't just use some Microsoft Word one-page thing, right?
Yes.
So, yeah, and you can tell people about that too, right? You know lots about contract law. So
Absolutely.
Yep.
We kind of touched on this before, but investment properties I want to talk about. How do you navigate that? Like, let's say I am in the position to buy a house and I want to buy another one for an investment property. We kind of did talk about that in terms of you have to pay 20% down and da-da-da-da. But like in terms of building wealth with real estate and investment properties, I want to get y'all or your opinion and chit chat on that.
Okay. Any question in particular about
Nope.
them? Or? Okay.
So just go ahead. Tell me all the things that you know.
Sure. When I look at investment properties, again, this is anecdotally, I don't own an investment property, but I'd be looking at cash flow on a cash flow monthly basis. Some people purchase a property and then they don't actually make any money on it on a monthly basis. Like the rent that they take in, that goes directly towards their mortgage, their expenses on the property, and they make $0 net per month. Some people do that and are comfortable with it because they're building equity in a property. Totally fair. Personally, I would like to see a cash flow on a monthly basis of a few $100s a month that are profit. Reason being is because that unit is, I look at it as a business and I want it to be profiting every single month into my pocket. Appreciation is kind of, it's that cherry on the top, but you want to be having cash flow on a monthly basis, I would say, is at least my opinion on it. For investments, I think you should be looking at something you can add value to too. So we had talked about flipping properties. You don't necessarily have to completely gut a house and make it, 20, like take a 1950 house and make it 2020.
Yeah.
But I think that you should buy properties that have you can paint some walls, you can do some new flooring, you can do that sort of thing, where you can add value to a property that immediately adds equity to the property. So you bought it for $380 and now it's worth $420 just because of the work that you've put into it. Good numbers. But that's at least my opinion on the investment game. There's obviously tons of different opinions on it. Also diversifying. So having one investment property is not as good as having 10. So in a lot of cases, investments are, those smaller commercial buildings where you have 8 or 10 units, and it's a lot easier to manage that because it's all at one location. You can make money on a diversified portfolio as opposed to one house that if it's vacant, it's vacant. You're not making money on it on a monthly basis. That's my opinion, at least.
Interesting. Okay.
So to kind of contradict Josh, I mean, when it comes to buying, like, let's say your first investment property or one investment property, just to be realistic, you're not going to be making insane profits every single month off of one property, right? Hopefully it's a few $100 a month. The best case scenario is actually to have a basement suite, so then you have 2 units and you can actually make a decent profit there, right?
Okay.
Essentially the goal here and your focus should be long-term wealth generation, right? So if you buy an investment property, you should really be looking at like the condition of the property and the rentability of it. So it's better to have very good tenants in there all the time versus like huge profits for 1 year and then you can never rent it again, right? So essentially you want to buy it with the long-term goal of like just building that equity. So essentially it's mortgage free, right? Or relatively mortgage free, right? And then you can refinance or whatever and make more money that way. So yeah, those are more the main focus, and buy it more as like the bank of your house versus huge cash flow potential, right? And then you really only build good cash flow on real estate investment as you build more and more properties, right? And it is, diversification, because if you have one property and you have one vacancy, you have 100% vacancy rate, right?
Yeah.
So investment properties are a good idea. You definitely have to be somewhat involved or be very good at due diligence with tenants so you don't get totally effed, right? And then when it comes to basement suites, because I've seen so many like just the shittiest, sorry, can we swear on this?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay. Oh yeah, the title is hate. The shittiest, like what I call YouTube renovations in like basement suites that are just so like pieces of junk. I'm like, you're not going to get good tenants when it looks
like
trash,
that,
right?
yeah.
So if you're buying a property with a basement suite somewhere down the road, buy something that has a fully legal suite for one, and then by definition, usually something with a fully legal suite is fairly well renovated, right? So I don't know. It's something where it's like you can do it the really cheap way, or you can do it pay the proper price, do it right the first time, and it'll yield better long-term results. So yeah.
Okay.
I don't know. Does that answer it at all?
I mean, I didn't have a question, so it was kind of just like whatever you guys went on.
Yeah. They're a good idea. You have to be involved. One thing that I'm curious to see will happen, but is Airbnb rentals. Because some people Airbnb if for like 2 weekends a month, like if they own a condo downtown, and make more money than they would monthly renting. So I'm curious if there will be. And I think there's people out there who do it, who are like rental guru types, but they only own Airbnb properties, not like normal rental properties. Granted, in the COVID world, those guys got
absolutely trashed. Yeah.
It'll be interesting going forward.
Yeah.
I was going to say something about that too. Like 6 months ago, you could break a house down into 5 bedrooms and do that sort of thing. But I mean, I agree with you're not going to be making huge amounts of money on one unit. I do think that you want to be cash flowing positive monthly. I just don't think you should. You should try not to lose money on a monthly basis, because I do see
probably a good idea.
I do see landlords that rent out at a loss every single month. They're losing $50 or $100 a month every single month. I don't like that.
Yeah, but that's also people who, like, more often than not, it's like a home that they just don't want to sell, so they just rent it to someone at like a rate just to get someone in there, right?
Yeah.
So
Interesting.
maybe this is a good point to tie in here of if you're someone who's going to buy whatever starter home with the eventual goal of keeping it to rent it, buy it more for rentability-ness up front, like focus more on the rentability of it versus your personal preference kind of thing.
Okay.
So like think a little more like an investor versus just a homeowner, you know?
I like dealing with investors. They're all about it's all about the numbers, right?
Yeah.
So it's very cut and dry. If the numbers work, the numbers work. If they don't, they don't. So
I would be curious to see if I could see people doing, like, is it Cambridge Lofts in Edmonton? That's like right across from Churchill Square, and it's like it's kind of a trendy building.
Where? Right across from Churchill. Isn't that the library?
No. But it's down there somewhere, and it's a conversion condo. Right?
Okay.
So they're like very trendy lofts with like exposed pipes in the ceiling and stuff. Right?
Yes.
there's a few of them.
Yeah. But places like that where they're like $100,000 to buy a condo, and then maybe doing something like that as an Airbnb rental, just because it's such a good location for like weekends and stuff or whatever.
Downtown core in that like area.
Or like we knew a guy who owned a condo in the 7th Street Lofts across from McEwen. If you're familiar. They're pretty cool. And then he would Airbnb it and again make like really good money on it. So
Well, yeah, that's so close to like Rogers, Jasper,
So I wonder if we'll see more people doing more that in the future. And if you had asked me last year, I would have said that was more of a trend I saw coming. But obviously now with COVID, that's investors would be kind of risk adverse to that. But
interesting.
Anyways, kind of a tangent.
Do you guys have any last words of real estate wisdom or just life wisdom before we end the show?
Life wisdom? No.
If I can say, you know how there's like that, it's kind of like the millennial avocado toast meme, right?
Yes.
So I do think we are kind of the generation who maybe the reason we can't afford a home is we do like it's the death of 1,000 cuts, right? So it's your $60 brunch every weekend and stuff, having
Ow.
having like 9 cell phones, 7 different TV subscriptions. When those costs add up, and I think this is something I've been becoming more aware of, because again, like I said, we're always sold on the monthly payment, and $8 a month, that's not bad. But I think that's a big like that article, the avocado toast article, we kind of roll our eyes at, but it brings up a very valid point.
Yeah.
Right? So that would be kind of my life wisdom is if you're serious about buying a home, like maybe manage some of those minor expense items, convenience expense
Stop
items.
buying your avocado toast.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a good point. Yeah. Think more long term. Like that's kind of the general theme of this, I think, and that's really in real estate.
It comes down to.
Yeah, it takes time. So that's if you start thinking on 50 years as opposed to right now, millennials might be more akin to buy homes than So, and I think it's not that we don't want to buy homes. I think it's just that
daunting affordability.
Yeah.
It's super scary.
Yeah.
I'm like, did you just hear me how hard I just stuttered about trying to buy a house? Like, that is how I feel.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I was going to say, we're there to help with the process.
Yes,
as opposed to
absolutely.
say, the most insanely wise piece of real estate I can give, if you're in Edmonton, is to go to thomasgharrington.com and download my home buyer's guide. There's a link at the top.
That's a good point.
And then call Josh and Tom and our team for
Incredible. Keep plugging yourself. Go ahead. This is the part.
For all your home buying needs in the greater YEG region.
Yeah. And if you're selling, Revere can help you too, because we offer some pretty sweet packages when it comes to selling. So,
Yeah.
So go check that out.
Go ahead. Where can they find you?
Yeah. Well, you can go ahead and find us at reverehome.ca, or again, Thomas's site is thomasgharrington.ca, I believe.
.com.
.com. Okay. He's got the .com. That's far
Go
more important.
ahead.
And I do have thomasharrington.ca, which reroutes to the other one.
Okay.
And then it's at thomasharrington.ca on Instagram.
Yeah.
You're just at Joshua Blaze, right?
Yep. At Joshua Blaze, and the company is at Revere_home.
I'll put this all in the show notes.
Yeah. Cool. And then if you want to listen to us on our podcast regularly for our more fun-filled content, at Long and Hard Podcast, we have 2 episodes with Carly. No, just one.
2?
Just one right now, I think.
Just one.
Just one, because, the other one was us on your show.
On mine.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, he's right about that.
Yeah, at Long and Hard Podcast.
Incredible.
And on all your podcast platforms, Long and Hard.
Yay.
That is it for today's episode. I really hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to screenshot this episode and share it over on Instagram and tag me at Hey Bitches Podcast. I would absolutely love to chat shit with you guys about this episode in the DMs. Before you go, make sure to subscribe to Hey Bitches wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you are an Apple Podcast listener, make sure to give the show a 5-star rating and review. It really, really does help me out, and I would really appreciate it. I love you guys so much. I hope you guys have an incredible day. And for now, bye-bye, bitch.